Hello everyone, welcome back to the e-learning space for MGM Higher Secondary School, Bokaro. This is the second video of your Class 8 English Grammar lesson number 13. Dear students, lesson number 13 in your English grammar textbook, The Grammar Right, is titled Phrases and Clauses. In our first video lesson on the same topic, we discussed about what are phrases and its different types. In this video lesson, we shall discuss about what are clauses and what are its different types. Begin with what's a clause? What is a clause? A clause is a group of words that contains at least a subject and a verb. So children, so far we have learned what are sentences, what are phrases, and now what are clauses. Do not get confused between these three. What are sentences? They are a group of words which make complete sense. It begins with a capital letter and ends with either a full stop, a question mark, or an exclamation mark. Then we understood what are phrases. They are also a group of words, but they do not make a complete sense. They do not contain a subject and a verb. Coming to clauses, clauses are also considered as cousins of phrases. They are a group of words, but they contain a subject and a verb. So you might say, children, if they are a group of words, they have a subject and a verb, can they be called as sentences? The answer is actually yes. There is a type of clause which is actually a simple sentence. We will learn about them in our next slides. Look at the examples of clauses. Ecology is a science because pollution causes cancer. These are clauses. Also remember children, clauses and phrases, they are all part of a sentence only. Let us understand more about a clause. Once again, it is a group of words that functions as one part of speech and includes a subject and a verb. There are different types and we will learn about them in this video. First, look at the examples. My friend who has autism is brilliant at quizzes. Who is the subject? Has is the verb, and these group of words, who has autism, is an example of a clause. A clause can also function as a noun. Remember, I cannot remember what happened last night. What is the subject? Happened is the verb. What happened last night is a clause. A clause can also function as an adverb. He put on weight when he stopped running. When he stopped running has subject he and verb stopped. These are the different functions of clauses as an adjective, as a noun, as an adverb. That brings us to the next question. What are the different types of clauses? The main or the independent clause. The name itself suggests that it does not require any other sentence to complete its meaning. It is independent, not dependent. So, as I said earlier, these kinds of clauses can also be called simple sentences. The next type is the subordinate or dependent clause. Now, these subordinate or dependent clause can once again be subdivided into three more different types: the noun clauses, adjective clauses, and adverb clauses. Depending on the type of function they serve in a sentence, they can be either a noun clause, an adjective clause, or an adverb clause. So, first let us discuss what are independent clauses. The name itself makes it very clear that an independent clause can stand alone as a simple sentence. It is not dependent on any other part of the sentence. Look at the example given. The secret of life is honesty. It is an independent clause and it is also a simple sentence. Here is a small glimpse of how a dependent clause can be found and how it is dependent on the main clause. If you can fake that, you've got it made. If you can fake that. This part of the sentence cannot be a simple sentence on its own. It cannot stand alone on its own. It needs the main sentence, you've got it made, to complete its meaning. So if you can fake that is a dependent clause. And it depends on the main clause, you've got it made, to make its meaning complete. Let us understand more about dependent clauses. A dependent clause is not a complete sentence and does not express a complete thought, just as we saw in the previous example. And such a clause is also known as subordinate clause. While explaining you subordinate conjunctions, I told you what is the meaning of subordinate. It means below rank, something that cannot exist on its own, something that is dependent. It cannot stand on its own, and because it is dependent, we call it subordinate clause. So you always have to join a dependent clause with an independent or a main clause to give a complete meaning. Now we also know that subordinate clauses can be divided into different types. The first category is noun clause. From our first video on this lesson, you should remember what are noun phrases. So clauses or noun clauses are not much different. The only thing is that they will have a subject and a verb, but they will function as a noun. So what are noun clauses? A clause that is with a subject and a verb that functions as a noun. Look at the example here. Whatever you wish is my command. Whatever you wish. Over here, this group of words, whatever you wish, has the subject you and has the verb wish. It is a clause. What type of a clause? A noun clause. Because this part of the sentence functions as a complete noun. Whatever you wish is my command. See the second example. I know where the treasure is. Where the treasure is again a clause. It has the subject, the treasure, and it has the verb is. Now, what kind of a clause is it? It is serving as a noun. Where the treasure is a noun. So this is a noun clause. For this, children, just brush up once again. What is a noun? A noun is a naming word. It can be a name of a person, place, animal, thing, and even an idea. So this clause is functioning as a naming clause, a noun clause. In both the examples, look carefully for the subject, verb, and the function the clause is serving. Coming to adjective clauses, once again, those clauses which serve as an adjective. Here is a brief review. An adjective clause is used to describe a noun. The car which was blue belonged to Ethel. A relative pronoun is usually used to introduce an adjective clause. Pablo, who is an English teacher, lives in Sarapique. So, who is an English teacher? We have a subject, we have a verb, and it serves as describing. It is describing something, a noun or a pronoun. Hence, it is an adjective clause. So this part of the sentence, which was blue, is a group of words. It has a subject, it has a verb, and it is describing another noun. Hence, it is an adjective clause. Similarly, who is an English teacher has a subject, it has a verb, and it is describing a person, a noun. Hence, it is an adjective clause. Coming to adverb clauses. An adverb clause is a subordinate clause that modifies a verb, adjective, or another adverb. It begins with a subordinating conjunction. It tells how, when, where, why, or to what extent. So always remember, an adverb clause begins with a subordinating conjunction and it serves the same purpose an adverb does in a sentence, but it is a group of words with a subject and a verb. So these adverb clauses will always modify a verb or an adjective or another adverb. Look at the examples. If Sam calls, please tell him that I will be late. So look at this part of the sentence. If Sam calls. It is beginning with a subordinating conjunction, first of all. It has a subject, Sam. It has a verb, calls. And it is modifying something in a sentence. What is it modifying? A verb. We played in the garden until the sun set. Until the sun set. Beginning with a subordinating conjunction and it is modifying something. Though she was busy, though, again a subordinating conjunction, she was busy. Though she was busy. Here again we have a subject, we have a verb, it is a clause. What kind of a clause? An adverb clause, because it is describing a verb, it is modifying a verb. John went home after he finished his lunch. After he finished his lunch is a group of words. It has a subject, it has a verb, hence it is a clause. Now what kind of a clause is it? It is an adverb clause. Why? Because it is modifying a verb. Now children, apart from dependent, independent clauses and three different types of subordinating clauses, that is noun clauses, adjective clauses and adverb clauses, we also have two more kinds of clauses, that are defining relative clauses and non-defining relative clauses. Let us first learn about what are defining relative clauses. Relative clauses allow us to add extra information about something without needing to make two sentences. They work in a similar way to adjectives. So relative pronouns like who, which is used for people, which used for things, where used for places, when used for times, and whose used for possessions. We could say, I saw a man, he looked like my uncle. But if we use relative clause, we can say it in a much better manner. Like, I saw a man who looked like my uncle. Similarly, the book is on the table, it is mine. Instead of saying the same idea in two different sentences, we can join them by using a relative clause. The book which is on the table is mine. Bournemouth is a town, I grew up there. Bournemouth is the town where I grew up. Luke is meeting us. Do you know when? Do you know when Luke is meeting us? So you see, we are joining two different sentences by using a relative clause and the meaning remains the same. However, it sounds better. That's the guy, his car was stolen. That's the guy whose car was stolen. So let us see, when do we use these defining relative clauses. We often use defining relative clauses in definitions. Whenever we are defining something, we use defining relative clauses. For example, a carpenter is a person who makes things from wood. A library is a place where you can borrow books. You can also shorten some relative clauses using a past participle or a present participle. Have you seen the teacher wearing a white suit? So we are just shortening. Instead of saying who is wearing a white suit, we are simply saying wearing a white suit. We didn't like the guy Instead of saying who was talking, we can simply say we didn't like the guy talking to your brother. So we are shortening the relative clause with a present participle or a past participle. I have lots of films directed by David Lynch. Now we can omit the relative pronoun when the pronoun is the object of the relative clause. The girl we spoke to last night is here. So when the relative pronoun is omitted, when there is an object pronoun. Bob Marley's Greatest Hits is the album which I listened to last night. These are just examples of how relative clauses can be omitted in certain cases. Now coming to non-defining relative clauses. These relative clauses simply provide extra information which is not essential to understanding the sentences. And there will always be commas. And you cannot substitute them by that. For example, who, which, were, when, whose. London, which is the capital of England, is one of the largest cities in the world. So if we simply say London is one of the largest cities in the world, still this information is pretty enough. But if we add which is the capital of England, it is adding an extra information, but it is not essential to understanding the complete sentence. And mark the commas over here. We always use non-defining relative clauses between commas. Tom Cruise, who has starred a lot of films, is a famous American actor. If we say Tom Cruise is a famous American actor, the main sentence is complete. However, if we add the non-defining relative clause, we are getting some extra information, but it is not very important to understanding the main information. And always remember, the non-defining relative clauses exist between commas. Tom Cruise, comma, who has starred a lot of films, comma, is a famous American actor. Now, having dealt with defining relative clauses and non-defining relative clauses separately, it is important that we see the differences between them in one common slide. So defining relative clauses, they give us essential extra information. But non-defining relative clauses add additional information which might not be essential or important to the understanding of the main idea. Defining relative clauses are not used between commas, but non-defining clauses are always set off by commas. Defining relative clauses can begin with that. Like I said, we can omit and begin it with that. But non-defining relative clauses, we do not begin it with that. Defining relative clauses are also known as restrictive relative clauses. This is a new information. And non-defining relative clauses are also known as non-restrictive relative clauses. So these are the four differences that we should mark. Dear students, that brings us to the end of our second video and the end of what are clauses and its different types. Remember, any confusion, we shall discuss it once again in our online classes. And in our next video, we are going to meet with the textual exercises. Till then, thank you and take care.